You've landed inside Launch Street, the Business Innovation Podcast, where we interview top innovators out there shaking things up so you can innovate, differentiate, and get further faster. Since you're here, we know you're the type of person that recognizes the importance of unlocking your innovation advantage so you can compete and win. And now, your host, the person that has worked with leading companies like Disney, Procter & Gamble, Aero Electronics, the U.S. Army Research Labs, and Red Robin on upping their innovation advantage. Tamara Gontor.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, Launch Street. Wherever you are, I hope you are ready for a treat. It's not often that you get to hear from the commander of a nuclear submarine, which is exactly what we're going to do today. Before we dig in, do you know what motivates you? If you know your everyday innovator style, you know. So for me, as a risk-taker experiential, I'm motivated by going bold and building something. If you're like Laura on my team, a collaborative tweaker, you're motivated by building connections and solving problems. So why does this matter? Because if you know how you are motivated, you know how to set yourself up for success. So if you don't know how you innovate, go to our website and take our assessment and find out. How you innovate is how you contribute and add value. And as we're talking about today, it also holds the key to becoming a stronger leader. And now, back to our regularly scheduled program. So how do you create a high-performing team that works well, not just when times are good, but when there's pressure to perform? Or maybe when they come together and they're in not such a good place when you become their leader. And as a leader, what can you do to ensure you are creating an environment where your team thrives? Well, what better person to ask than the leader that was once a commander of a nuclear submarine, David Marquet. He's a student of leadership and organizational design, a former nuclear submarine commander, author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, Turn the Ship Around, and one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers in 2018. David imagines a workplace where everyone engages and contributes their full intellectual capacity, a place where people are healthier and happier because they have more control over their work, a place where everyone is a leader. This is a treat, so let's go do this.
David, it is so good to be back with you. Just for launch readers out there, I met David at keynoting an event we were both at. So David, I'm so glad you're here on Launch Street with us.
Thanks a lot. It was fun meeting you, and I think you gave me a lift back to the airport. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. So we're still a little new to each other. So what's the one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
Yeah, I don't eat mammals.
Oh.
So the first thing people say, well, what's a mammal? And I'm usually saying, well, live, young, 4 legs, mostly, because the mammals that we eat have 4 legs. But yeah, it kind of started about 30 years ago. I was eating less and less red meat. And when I met my wife, she was like, I don't eat. Well, what do you eat? Well, I don't eat that. I don't eat that. Well, do you have a rule? I need rules. I need to systematize this process. And then I figured it out. I said, here's the rule. You don't eat mammals. So it just kind of became a family rule.
Oh.
So that's my thing.
That's got to be hard. I mean, you didn't do that when you were in active duty, were you? Because that's got to be hard.
Well, yeah, near the end, though, I started doing it halfway through my time.
Well, I feel like your comment, though, about systems and processes really kind of parlays into what we're talking about today. And just very quickly in a couple sentences, I did a little bit in the intro, but tell people your kind of what you're pulling from in terms of experience before we start digging in.
Yeah, so my experience was coming up through the command and control type environment, very traditional, male-centric, and it's an environment where you're not supposed to be vulnerable. You would never say, hey, how did I show up in the meeting yesterday? And did you feel like I was listening to you? It was about always knowing the answer. And if you didn't know the answer, pretending like you knew the answer. And I actually was pretty good at that because I really studied hard and was smart. And so I did often know the answer, and I got promoted. Then when I went to be the captain of a nuclear submarine, it all changed because at the last minute I got shifted to a submarine that was not the one I had spent 12 months preparing for. And it was a different kind of submarine. So all of a sudden, the gig is up. And I show up with this sort of pre-thought of being invulnerable, knowing all the answers, giving clear orders, and it just didn't work. And I gave an order, it didn't work. The guys tried to do it. The officers ordered it, even though they knew it was BS. And the realization I had was that the problem wasn't that I gave bad orders as a leader. The problem was I was giving orders. And I needed a team that didn't need to be told what to do. And so that's the journey that we went on, which is how do you create a team where people are leaning into you as the leader rather than you leaning into them, telling them what to do. And it was amazing.
And I mean, you've been written up all over for this. And as I kind of said earlier and kind of alluded at, I came early to this event we were at because I wanted to hear you speak. And then we were riding in the, I don't know if I guess you ride in the Uber. I was about to say drive the Uber, but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We were in the Uber because I wasn't the driver. And I said to you, and I don't know if you remember this, but I said, yeah, but like the whole not speaking up thing. I said, yeah, but you're in a life or death situation, right, in the submarine. Yet in organizational corporate America, like it's not life or death. And your comment back to me kind of took me by surprise. And you said something like, you would be amazed at how little speak up in all environments.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is we blame our people for not speaking up. And then the solution is, since it starts with the idea that they're the problem, the solution is to give you speaking up encouragement or an adrenaline shot or coaching or something like that. But the problem is we as leaders create environments where speaking up is unhealthy, it's unwanted, it's unwarranted, and it's unappreciated. And that's the root problem, but it's too hard to put the mirror on us. And we do case studies. I mean, you could look at, so for example, airplane accidents. One of the case studies that we've been looking at carefully recently is this El Faro, which was a container ship that left 2 football fields long, a big ship, 2015, left Jacksonville, Florida, sailed straight into a hurricane and sank, and 33 people lost their lives. And then fortunately, we have the transcript because we recovered the black box, the U.S. government. Not my little team, but we covered the government.
It comes to your home mailbox.
Yeah. The government we covered the black boxes. We know exactly what those people say, and you can see them struggling. You can see the junior crew members. I mean, there's no doubt they're sailing into a hurricane. It's 2015. They have all the equipment. They're watching it. And they talk about seeing it on Fox News, and they're being very reticent. When they do call the captain and speak up, they sound hesitant and deferential. Well, I could be more precise, but it looks like we're going to be pretty close to the eye. And I mean, it's a hurricane. It's as big as the state of South Carolina off the coast of the Bahamas. And you don't need to be that precise. And yet they persist. And so this is the frustrating thing I have, is that this reticence gets people killed and or frustrates people and makes bad products.
Right. And so imagine, right, if we're doing it in situations where we're steering a ship into a hurricane, we're going to do it in an office meeting as well, where maybe not our lives are on the line, but, our jobs and I think the success of projects. And, you talk about, I want to build on kind of all the stuff you're saying about, I've heard you talk about it and write a little bit about the deadly ingredients that make up organizations today that are ineffective. One of them we just talked about, right, which is speaking up. What are some of these, and how do you overcome them?
The way I think about it is we've inherited a playbook from the industrial age, and which is designed to do certain things. The first thing you got to understand is that we split humanity in 2. There are the thinkers and the doers, the leaders and the followers. And we have codes in our organizations based on what people wear and what labels they have to put them in these 2 groups. And so since that's the structure, all leadership and management comes down to coercing other people to do something that they didn't choose to do, because the deciders and the doers are 2 different groups. And what we want now is we need to build structures that allow the doers to also be the deciders. So now it's split by time. At some moments, most moments we're doing, but occasionally we pause and we decide. So this is one of the plays. So for example, the industrial age play was called Obey the Clock. I got to keep production going. And then if I feel the impulse, things are slowing down, I take out the riding crop and I hit my team and I keep them going. And the new play is called Control the Clock, because the leader now has to play the role of, all right, time out. Hold on a second. Are we going in the right direction? We can be going 100 miles an hour, but we're in the wrong direction. And so there's a series of these plays that I think we need to shift from obey the clock to control the clock, from coerce to commit, from conform to connect. So these are some of the things.
So this might be a naive question, but how do I know, if I'm a leader and I'm listening to this, how do I know if I'm in that kind of obey versus control the clock environment, or that I'm creating one of those two environments?
I think here's the question. How many times do people on your team raise their hand and say, let's pause and make sure we're on the right track? And how many of those end up being unnecessary pauses? So in other words, if every time we raise our hand and it turned out, oh yeah, it was a good thing you stopped us, we were about to make a big mistake, then that means it's not happening enough, because it means that the team is only raising their hand when they're 99.9% sure that it's going to be a problem.
Oh, that's interesting.
But today's uncertain world, the probabilities of you being that sure about the future are very low. You need the team to be able to raise their hand when there's only a 50% probability of there being a problem, which means that half the time people raise their hand, it won't be a problem. Right. So that's a measure. The ratio of how many times do we pause and evaluate and have it not be a problem is a measure of how healthy an environment we have for people raising their hand.
So will you share the story of the button? Hopefully that's enough of a prompt. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. But you were saying, like, one of the things in what you're kind of sharing is also this ability of the leader to stop and say, I don't have all the answers. And it's okay that you, as my team, want to take a pause, or we can figure this out together. And you shared a story from, I think it was from stage, about the button and the first time you did that, and you're on a nuclear submarine. So just to put it in context, hopefully is that enough of a prompt?
Yeah. So like I said, I grew up in this environment where you were paid, you were supposed to know the answers. And I think in general, it's good to know the answers. But don't pretend to know the answer if you don't know the answer. And so when I showed up on the Santa Fe, which was a different submarine, I didn't understand all the equipment and how it worked because I never saw it before. And I would ask questions. Hey, tell me what all these buttons do. And the poor sailor, they'd know 9 out of 10 of them, but they get to the 10th one, they'd be like, yeah, I forgot. And then everyone looked at me because I was supposed to know all, and I would give them the answer. But of course I didn't know. And I had this moment, the first time this happened, I had this moment where I wanted to pretend, well, you find out and come back. And something weird was going in my head that day, and I just didn't do it. And I said, yeah, I don't know either. And they were looking at me. And they were looking. I never heard a submarine captain say they didn't know, right? And you don't see it on the movies right?
No, they know everything.
So, yeah. So I was waiting for the heavens to shake and the lightning to come down, and nothing happened. In fact, what happened was other people started saying that they didn't know, and that they would look it up. And so we shed this artificial knowing skin to reveal sort of the soft underbelly of we don't know. But as the result of doing that, we were able to learn and actually know. So we actually knew more because we admitted that we didn't know some stuff. And that knowing more was one of the cornerstones that allowed me to give the team more and more control over decision making than on any other submarine, which was our powerful juice that we had.
And what do you think in that moment? What do you think was the shift for the team, for those on your submarine with you, right? For having you as the leader own the fact that you didn't know, but make it more. I think more importantly, what you're saying too is you saying I don't know meant it was okay for them to say I don't know, and that trickled out for the rest of your time together. So, what was the shift for them?
It was a burden lifted. A couple guys said it was like chains falling off. And I was sympathetic to that because I'd always felt the stress of knowing and the inadequacy of not knowing. And I don't want to necessarily give people permission to, well, don't know anything and be totally ignorant. That's not right. But it's just, there are certain things that are highly knowable about your job, like how the code works and what the laws are and those kind of things. But then there are some other things that are highly unknowable, what the future holds, how a certain product will land with clients. Whether we just submitted a big proposal today for a product that's kind of new for our company to a big corporate. I don't know how it's going to land. We didn't know how to price it really, and so we just said, well, let's try this and see what happens. And it's in the not knowing that you create this experimental, growing, learning mindset, which I think over the long run really is more beneficial.
Right. And wouldn't you say that I think given how unpredictable and volatile times are right now, you just have to own that you don't know and you won't know. And a lot of things are trial and error.
Absolutely. And, like you, I ended up going out to Silicon Valley and doing some work out there. And basically those guys all start with this premise of, I don't know anything. I have a hunch and then I'm going to test it. And it's all about testing, reiterate, try something new. And then, but what we see is, it sounds Airbnb. Oh, look, seems pretty smooth, works pretty well. We didn't see the 35 iterations that they went through and all the testing that they went through and the course corrections that they went through to get from where their initial concept to what we see now.
Well, what's funny just in Airbnb is that I believe, right, they were looking for extra space during conferences. And it was like air mattresses on people's living rooms who had extra space when they'd have these big, consumer shows and whatever that would come to town. And that's how it started, was that. And it didn't quite work, it turns out.
Right. So. But yeah, and if they'd stuck with that, we wouldn't be talking about that.
That's right. What happened when you vowed to stop giving orders? Because I will tell you, as a type A person, when I heard you say that, I might have skipped a beat for a second, wait, what? I'm all about listening, but hold the phone.
That's good. That's good self-awareness and honesty there.
Oh no, I'm a type A. I get it. I can suck the air out of a room.
So I have, by the way, there's some of that in all of us. So I have an activity that we can all practice this, because this is the closest I've come to how it felt for me, which is the next 10 times you go out to eat at a restaurant, get the waiter to pick for you and bring you your meal without you even approving it. So
don't even tell me what it is, just get me something?
Correct. You choose. You want them to choose for you, not to play it safe. Now, you may have to bound it. So for me, who doesn't eat mammals, I might say, I'll take anything without a mammal, but anything else on the menu is open game. It's up to you. Or it depends on what kind of a mood I'm in. Some days it's easier for me than others. And so this is what I want you to notice. Some days it will be easier for you to do this activity than others. Some restaurants will be easier. Some waiters and waitresses will respond in different ways. And so two things need to happen. One, you will sense in yourself the anxiety with not knowing. And I want you to get in tune with that feeling, because that means you're on the right track. And number two is you're going to have to make it safe for them to make that decision for you. And when they kind of lean back and they're like, really, it's about safety. It's about, they're worried about a bad review. They're worried about no tip. They're worried about bringing you the quote wrong thing. And so you're going to have to develop the skill to read their body language. And you're going to do things like say, hey, you're going to want to develop a relationship first. Hey, how's your day going? Oh, good. So look, here's the deal. I'm on this program. I'm not supposed to make this. That's kind of how I started. I'm not supposed to make decisions. Would you like to help me? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So you got to give them choice. Like if you go to your team and say, no, I order you to be empowered, it doesn't really work.
Right.
You guys say, would you like to have more decision making? Anyway, it's so good. I just find it has all the elements of what I felt as a submarine commander. And the good news is no one dies, no matter what.
That's usually a plus side to things.
Yeah, that's the upside.
Usually.
So
yeah, I like that.
So have fun. We have whole teams doing this, and they collect their stories, and then they compare and really try it at a high-end restaurant, try it at McDonald's, try it when you're tired, try it when you're not, try it in a foreign country. And it's just, it goes on and on and on.
So what's interesting is while you're telling that, kind of a couple things are coming to mind. One is if I go to this Greek diner that we always go to on Saturdays, who know me by my first name and they know my kids, if I went there and did it, I'd feel okay. I'd be at ease because I know, like, I'm so comfortable in that environment because it's secure. Like I know it. I've seen everything on the menu. But it's a false sense of security because I'm so comfortable to begin with, right? But if I went to a new restaurant or maybe something I just wasn't familiar with, I'd probably be a little bit worried.
Right. Yeah. And this is exactly the feelings I want the leaders to get in touch with. And why is it that it's okay? So in other words, it's easier for you to empower your team in the Greek restaurant than it is in some other restaurant. So understand what the difference is and how can I make the conditions of the other restaurants, or think of them as different departments in your company, the same as modeling the Greek restaurant so that it's easy to empower over there. The problem with empowerment, I mean, I've never met a person who says, no, I don't want to empower my team. Like everyone, quote, wants to. It's, do we know how and what are the conditions? And this is a practical exercise. And the other thing I really like about it is it kind of gets people away from this idea leadership is a bunch of stuff I'm going to put in your head. Like, I don't really care about that. I just want to see you go out there and see if you can get that person to pick your meal for you. Not, oh, hey, I recommend this, and then you approve it because that just made it too easy. But hey, I don't want to know till you bring it to me. If you can't do that, we're not going to hire you.
So there's a couple of questions I want to ask you. One is, are you saying that, so if I'm that leader and I'm trying to create that Greek restaurant, just to build on that analogy, and we're dealing with maybe a project that's a little messier, I need to work a little bit harder to make it comfortable for my team to make decisions versus maybe something that we've been managing for years where we all kind of know what's going on?
Yeah, both things. The first thing is it's going to be harder for you, right? So when you say messier, it's there's more unknowns, there's more uncertainties, maybe there's more downside, and so you're going to be pushed into a risk adverse mindset, which is going to tend to cause you to want to over control, to exert more control. Now, I don't think those reasons that we just talked about are good reasons to exert more control. Good reasons to exert more control are, one, a low technical competence on the part of the team. So if they just don't know whatever the programming language, then you have to tell them. And number two is low understanding of the purpose or the why or having clarity. Those are reasons why you want to take more control. But just because something is more complicated, I don't think is a legitimate reason.
Do you think that, I think when I heard you tell the story, you also talked about one of your, should I say seamen? Is that right? I'm not even sure what to say.
Yeah, okay. We sailors, one of our sailors.
Sailors, I like it. I wasn't sure if my language was right. You had said it raised his hand, was like, what if you stopped giving, commands or something? Like they wanted it too. Do you think that's because just we as humans, we all want to contribute and we all want to be valued and we all want to have control of our own destiny, for just a kind of fluffy way to say it, versus kind of constantly being told what to do. And that happens at work all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Well, not only that, we know humans are healthier when they have more control over their lives. Even if they think they have more control over their lives, they're healthier. They have better weight. They have less cardiac problems. They live longer just because they have the sense of having control. And I think there's a really interesting article that just came out in the Atlantic by Arthur Brooks, where he's talking about the decline, managing your decline, which comes sooner than you think, your professional decline. And the problem is people typically, this is worse for men apparently, start to feel unappreciated. Like we've been masters of whatever, or run my own company, or lauded at work, and then people just stop paying attention to us because we're not, we're retired, or we're not that important anymore. And it's that lack of feeling valued that leads to depression.
That's it. Versus like lack of something to do, which is what we think of it as.
Correct. Yes, correct. It's the lack of feeling valued. Now, some people mitigate this final phase of life by redirecting how they think of their value. Doesn't come from these external things. And those people end up being even happier and more satisfied. There's sort of a deep satisfaction and contentment that can happen late in life. But some people end up going the other direction. And I think at work, at least in my mind, I almost had it backwards for a long time, which is you're going to, like, if we value you, then you can contribute. But the whole idea is the purpose of creating an environment where people can contribute is so that they feel valued. This otherwise, we don't need to gather in workplaces. We're not doing it.
That's right. Well, and you spend so much time there. And to your point about contribution, I mean, ultimately, as human beings, I think that's what we strive to do, and in innovative and often creative ways. I have no doubt that if I'm someone out there, an innovator out there listening, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I've given my team, latitude to make decisions, and they're bad or whatever. And one of the things or they don't work, and I have to take control back, right? That's kind of the typical immediate, I'd say, fight or flight response to what you're saying. But one of the things I've heard you say that I think is a way forward with this is, if you want your people to think, don't give them instructions, give them intent. Will you talk about what you mean and how to actually do that?
Yeah, so you give them intent, and the other thing is you got to think of this as a rheostat, a dimmer. A light switch is a dimmer, not a switch. So the language of intent. So here's a typical situation. Team comes into your office and they say, "Hey, we got a problem with or we got a decision point at this project. We need to know whether launch date is in 2 weeks. We haven't completed all the testing. We need to know whether we should delay the launch or stay on track." Now, 99 out of 100 leaders are going to be tempted to solve the answer. They're going to say, "Hey, I really think launch is on time. We've made a commitment. We've gone public with this, whatever." Okay, so then there's that. But what you want to do, I think, is say, "Okay, guys, well, let me tell you what's important. Organizational reputation. It depends what the software is. It has to be right the first time, or it's a game. It doesn't really matter. We can fix it on the first review." So you give them the criteria and then say, "Okay, now go away," and then you guys come back with what you guys think. But that feels like a delay, and it feels like lack of progress, and that feeling of lack of progress tricks our brain into doing the short term. No. Look, we got to launch on time. So you just give them the answer, and then they go away. But you didn't train, you didn't develop leaders. You didn't invite any thinking. You thought, they just did. You separated the world into thinkers and doers.
So you tell them what the goals or the outcomes, what's important about the project, the timeline, whatever it is, and then let them use that to make decisions. And frankly, they might think of things that you didn't think of to begin with to get to those goals that might determine that decision. Yeah.
And look, the whole idea of intent-based leadership is we're stating our intent. Okay, so we intend to launch on time. It hasn't happened after. It's not we did it based leadership. Well, we launched or we didn't launch or whatever. Like now you're trapped because the event already happened. The key is to have the conversation before the event. Because you can still say no. You can ask questions. You can still say no. You still have veto power. But it's that activating their brains, making the doers also be the deciders, getting them to be. That's the key thing.
I just kind of had a thought or an insight given what you were saying. I think all too often, to your point about the event, we wait until after the event to assess what went right and what went wrong. And that's where we talk about what's important in goals and outcomes. Right. Versus doing it before. So we do it retrospectively and then we pat ourselves on the back for like, look at us, we learned so much.
Right.
But we're not actually impacting the work itself by doing that.
Right. And now we have to give quote feedback. Oh, right. Yeah, that didn't go so as opposed to inviting feedback. So it's not about giving feedback, it's about creating a culture where people say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you guys all think about it? That's a stupid. Hey, I wouldn't say it, but someone else might. Oh, great. Now, like, and so first of all, people are asking for feedback ahead of time. And then, and we always like to ask questions like, we do a mental, I call it fast forward. Hey, imagine it's 6 months from now. This has turned out to be one of the biggest mistakes we ever made. What would be the most likely reason? And the software engineer raises his hand and says, well, there's this gap in the code, which is exploitable, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Okay. Well, thanks for telling me that. We got 2 weeks. Let's see.
Good to know. Good to know. It creates a level of comfort to bring up the things that you're concerned about, because we all have them, right? We all go home. We're thinking about our work. We know the gaps. To our earlier conversation, we're afraid to say them. But to ask in a almost not hypothetical, but in this like in an imaginary world, if this happened, what would it be? I would imagine allows people to bring those things up in a way that allows you to address them while you still can in an environment that's safe.
Yeah. And so this is a different language for me. I had to learn as a submarine captain. I didn't look like you see guys in the movie. I would say, hey, here's our, if we discuss a plan, I said, okay, look, we're going to go with option B here. But look, guys, this is really coded to the assumption that the enemy is over here. If it turns out the enemy is actually over there, and you see any indication of that whatsoever, and our assumption is wrong, then we really need to know that, because the whole plan is not going to work. And I need you to tell me. So I would say, so I'm worried about, I'm thinking about, I'm not sure. These were words that were not in my language.
Yeah. I have this kind of language around, I call it wet clay language. So when you're presenting an idea, instead of pushing your brilliance as final on someone, it kind of goes to what you're saying. I'm thinking about, I've got this kind of nugget of an idea. I'm worried about, I've got this thought, not sure to work. That switch in language opens up so much more communication and openness with your team than if it's like, here's what I think we should do. Right. Here's what the right thing to do is, all of that language.
I love wet clay. Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, I got this amorphous notion.
Yep.
I need some help in shaping the thing. Oh, by the way, we all have the ability to shape it.
Amorphous is a SAT word, way too big for me, but totally on board with it. I want to flip the gears a little bit. Right? I want to talk a little bit about the flip side for a second. So we've talked about giving away control, kind of letting other people make decisions, but there's another side to that coin, which is accountability, and making sure that, if we're all going to be decision makers and we're all going to have control of the clock, right? We've got to be accountable too. It's not about pushing stuff off. And I took a lot of notes during your keynote, obviously. So if you're out there, like, hire David for a keynote, it was phenomenal. And I don't normally get to see other keynoters when I'm traveling. It just like the kind of stars aligned for that to happen, but it was mind blowing. And so the other thing you talked about was you couldn't use the word they. And so after that, if you could share the story in a second, but after that, I went and I started to track my team and myself of how often we were doing. I would just make a little, like a notch in my notebook. And I was like, wow, they didn't get it to me. They said this, and I had I said, listen, I just saw this guy, David, talking, this is commander of the submarine. And like, this was one of the lessons. And I got my team out of it. But what was, I think, so valuable in us not being able to say they is that we found in owning what we were talking about, whatever it was, the situation, we found other solutions, which was so cool. So I just went a little bit ahead of us, but will you back up and share like why they doesn't work?
Yeah. So so thanks for that. And that was a really fun day. But the remarkable thing about you is you actually took one of the ideas and did.
I did right away. I first did some research. I was like, is this a problem for us? Oh my gosh, yeah. It is.
So we like to do these retrospectives, and we did them on the submarine. But I heard this they word in terms of, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. And we had they by rank, we had they by division, we had they by department. So we had all this sectored, days. We had carved the organization up into a lot of different days. And I like to say the team boundary is defined by the we-they boundary. It's not defined by the org chart boundary. And when you ask people,
yes.
Yeah, right. So as soon as you hear someone say they, their mindset is that person is on a different team, and I'm not responsible for that behavior. It's a shifting blame kind of mental approach. It's a lack of ownership. And so what we did was so by the way, I didn't have a lot of thinking. When I was on the submarine, I was just trying to survive, and I would just say these rules. And if they worked, we stuck with it. So I'd say, there's no they, you can't say the word. And then people would say, well, they want to say, well, and then they have to say, well, even though they're in the supply department, then nope, can't say that. Well, we got the wrong part. Okay, great. And there's no blame, there's no recrimination. And all you do is go jump into we all knew the supply department was responsible for part. But the really cool thing was, after about 6 months, and I can't tell you exactly, our brains literally had changed. And so when I saw someone at a different rank and I saw someone in a different department, my brain, all of us, would feel like they were on the same team.
You were a real team.
Yeah, but it was because, so I don't know what's happening with your team. For us, there was this sort of palpable tripping point where we were saying the word for a while, but then we just started feeling like a team. And people visiting the ship would say, I can't, there's this culture of teamwork. I've never seen it. And because I'm kind of a jokester, I'd say, no, we don't have a culture. We have a rule that you have to use the word we, and that changed our brains. And they go like, what? But I think that's the thing. And we say we act our way to new thinking. And this is why I like, so for example, to go to dinner and don't order, because leadership is not about theory. It's about your engagement in the real world with real humans and how messy and unpredictable that can be. And if you don't get out there and practice, your leadership muscle is not going to work.
I really appreciate what you just said about we act to change our thinking. Because I think all too often in leadership and in what you were just alluding to, and in innovation, this is very true. We put out here are the theories, here's the concepts, here's the thinking, and then the acting doesn't happen, and then we wonder why things never change.
Right. Yeah, and then we even say, 80% of change models don't have any impact, but we're going to do the same change model as everyone else, which
right.
is we're going to convince people they need to change, and then we're going to hope that they cross our fingers up they change. It's like, that doesn't work.
Right. So this could be a whole different podcast, but I have a whole issue with the change management concept, because it implies that change is a project, right? And it's all about here's the plan and the process. It's not about here's how we act and behave and create. And I read a stat recently, you've probably seen it, something like 56% of change management projects fail. And I was like, that's like Russian roulette. That's horrible. Why would you keep doing that?
Oh, I thought it was higher, but
it might be, but that's
good news.
It's still horrible. This kind of, so you have a book coming out in, I think it's February of 2020, called Leadership as Language. And I'm assuming part of what we just talked about is really in here, but just high level, what's that book about?
Yeah, so I'm really trying to unpack this whole idea of how are we programmed to respond? I'll give you a simple example. Someone comes up to you and says, hey, I think we should delay product launch. In other words, and it strikes you as wrong. What are the exact next words that come out of your mouth? Most people respond, reply, or react. This is what I think. I call this play. These are plays. We're programmed to be this way. I'm going to explain why you're wrong. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to react. We don't investigate with curiosity what it is that the other person may be seeing that we don't see. And so the whole idea is, again, we're going to demystify leadership and the mindset. Like, it's not about, quote, be curious. It's about what words come out of your mouth, and are they words that invite curiosity, or are they words that just push the other people back, the other person back into his or her corner. So it's about these 6 plays, and I really try and focus on the words that we use.
I can't wait for that to come out, because I do think it's that acting and that thinking that we were just talking about, and the whole, like, with the word they, that it really makes a difference. And I think in innovation, we hear, just to loop it back, they don't get it. They think it won't work. They're not understand, right? It's the same kind of thing. And it implies, to your point, that they're not on the same team, and that, like, you've got something they don't too, which I think is kind of silly and egotistical. But I love that that book is coming out. In your work, what do you see that stops people from innovating or bringing those more innovative ideas to the table?
You're the expert there. All right. So this is a trick question, I'm sure. But to me, the problem isn't that they don't have ideas. They have ideas. The problem is they're simply not expressing their ideas, or they're not expressing them in a useful way. They're expressing them by bitching to their coworker at the coffee machine. And so you got to break that. And again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is we need to create environments where those different ideas are welcome. All innovations start sounding weird. The first time someone says something, it sounds weird. So when someone says something to you that sounds weird, it could be wrong, but it could be the next amazing innovation. And so the way we react really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, we can't innovate and analyze at the same time. And when we analyze so immediately, or try to analyze as we're innovating, we shut down a lot of ideas, kind of to your point about kind of judging it or kind of responding to it. And it's always fascinating to me to see how we're so quick to judge it when we should really at some point just allow it to happen, and then we can judge later.
Yeah. How can we test that? How can we learn? What would be the first step? These are the things that I've tried to say instead of, no, I didn't think of that. Must be wrong.
Right. And I love what you just said about like the first question after that is testing or experimenting, right? Versus just judging in theory. Because you're so right. Like if it's so funny, I always think about the iPad, which is such an obvious example. But if you had gone to focus groups, which I think are the bane of existence in a lot of ways, but if you had gone and asked a group of people, right, well, do you want this thing? It doesn't, no, you can't make calls, and no, and it's big, and no, it doesn't have the power of a computer. I mean, they do now, but they didn't when they started. Really, all you can do is, some video game stuff on it and maybe watch a few things. Do you want it? They'd be like, no, that's crazy. Like, I don't need that.
Right.
So you're right. You never know. Before I ask
you could download Netflix on it. Oh,
Right.
okay. That's a game changer. But that didn't happen till after the thing came out.
Right. Exactly. This has been so chock full of incredible lessons. But before I ask you the last one, where can people go to learn more and connect with you?
Hey, a couple places. One, davidmarquet.com, our website. We have a fun weekly video where I try and condense some sort of useful thing like this: go to dinner and don't order, into 1 minute of leadership. It's called Leadership Nudges. We have a YouTube channel, Leadership Nudges. You can subscribe there. You can enroll on our website. Go to Amazon. You can see the books. And but thanks everyone for being leaders and helping make the world a better place.
I was just thinking as you were saying that about the dinner thing. I have 2 things I hope launch readers that we do out there. One is that we go that we give control of our order away to somebody else. And the second one is to stop saying they and see what happens to our team when we pull that out of our language. I think those things are so powerful. And I bet the other interesting part of the order is what happens when you get food back that you actually don't like. And how respond, right?
Well, so there's that. And then there's what I like to do is ask the person how the experience was for them.
What kind of responses do you get for that?
Oh, like all over. I thought you were crazy. I thought you were a whack job. Oh, I had so much fun. Oh, I've been waiting for this. Oh, it was really great. But the idea is the phrase is we're pushing authority to information, not information to authority. Normally the process is I have the authority to make decision. You have the information about what the best things are to eat at this restaurant. So therefore you're going to push your information to me. I'm going to make a decision. It's going to go back to you. But the model for the 21st century organization is to push the authority for making decisions to the people who natively have the information. So I'm going to push the authority to you. That's the way you close the gap. And so that's sort of the theory behind this practice.
It's fantastic. Two really powerful to-dos came out of this conversation. So David, what's your final piece of advice for those of us trying to up our leadership skills?
Well, I guess the third thing is that we talked about, and I would just try one of these because you don't want to overload yourself, is inviting feedback. Don't waste time giving feedback. I want you to practice inviting feedback. And so take the 30-day feedback game. So for 30 days in a row, I want you to invite someone, could be at work, could be a stranger, could be a family member, but ask them to give you feedback on something that you've done or that you're wearing or how's my driving, whatever. Start simple, start unemotional, start easy, and see if you build up. And then just see how it feels to invite that feedback. And it's a skill. And then you'll find yourself detoxifying from the whole nervousness of feeling judged, your mindset of getting better. And over the long run, you'll have a much, I think, more interesting and fulfilling life.
So just to make sure I understand, are you saying I should go invite feedback? Guys, it's so funny, my language is so like, tell me what to do. Isn't that funny? So I just noticed as I was saying it, is your concept more about like, tell me how I'm doing feedback, or more like, hey, give me feedback on this work, this project, or is it all of the above?
So it's basically all of the above, because I think asking for feedback, there's some nuances in feedback. So for example, if you say something that, you give a keynote and you say, hey, how was my keynote? That's a useless question. Oh, it was great, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right.
So you might say something like, what was one thing that was unclear? Or what do you think or how well do you understand what to do? Or what thing really resonated with you? And so now you're learning how to actually ask for feedback, the targeted questions are one skill. But more importantly to me, it's this whole idea of opening yourself up to feedback. I ask, like, I go into Starbucks and I'm kind of a clumsy Starbucks orderer. You don't want to be behind me. I'm like,
you're that guy.
Yeah, I'm that guy, right? And I don't pay with cash, though. Okay, so let's be clear. It's not that. So and then I'll say, like, hey, how was I as a customer? Or different situations. Hey, how was my driving? How well did you feel listened to in this last interaction that we had? And you'll see these opportunities. Just do one a day and build up to things that mean more. Mm. But that's the idea. Yeah, it's exactly the idea.
So I love this kind of pattern of start with things that are more lifestyle, more, I guess, easier to kind of take head on, and then build up to more. And that is exactly what you're saying about act to change your thinking, right? Start with these little actions and you'll work your way up. So David, thank you so much. This was absolutely phenomenal. I was so excited after I met you to have you on the podcast. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks. That was a great day getting to meet you. And thanks to all your listeners for what they do to make us all better.
Thanks for hanging with us on Inside Launch Street. If you know someone that is truly ready to unlock their innovation advantage, have them join you on Launch Street. Discover your innovation advantage. Build a team of high-performing innovators and ignite ideas and solutions that create massive impact. GOTO, launchstreet.com. Remember, innovators, if you don't take the leap, somebody else will.